When I was in that space, there was like kind of this human element that was missing from me. I need story back in my life. I need to engage with story. I need to not just be a passive consumer of story, but I think this zeitgeist of success and money-making and growth and expansionism comes at the cost of what so many of our old fables are about. So today has been one of those days. Today and yesterday is like one of those days where there's no like major one thing going wrong. It's just every single thing that could possibly go wrong all day, every day is going wrong. I won't get into all the details because again, when you hear about all the like little things going on, they're all like small. It's just like 2 days in a row of Nick being gone, the garage flooding. I took Freya to a dog sitter. She decided to shit in their house and nipped at the person. That was awesome. And I'm like 90% sure I'm getting sick. All the while I'm struggling and fighting with the world over first world problems. Truly the most first world problems. I'm listening to this storybook right now. I've been really into something called Lit RPG, which is basically an isekai. So if you don't know what it is, it's like basically somebody wakes up in like a video game or an alternative world that is like a video game or a fantasy world. They're incredibly, I call them action smut. They're very simple plots. Their characters are incredibly 1D typically. They're not very well written, but they're really easy to listen to. It's nice because if you're listening to them, you zone out for like 10 minutes and then you zoom back in. You can kind of like fill in the details. You don't really need to pay that close of attention. So there's something I really enjoy listening to when I'm like really stressed because I can kind of like mentally escape into them, but I can still kind of process in the background. But this latest book that I've been listening to, I was really on the fence if I liked it. I started a new series called The Wandering Inn. And the first book annoyed me a fair bit, but it really redeemed itself in like the last like 4 chapters. Enough so that I was like, damn, this like has a lot of potential. Like the writer you can see is really grown just through the first book. So I started listening to the second and the book starts talking about like the importance of story. And it was really interesting to listen to because I guess I really lost the importance of story in college and kind of in my later adolescence. I became very fixated on fact and nonfiction. I basically viewed it as a waste of time if you were reading fiction. So I only ever read research articles, watched documentaries, read like nonfiction science books or something like that if I was going to like do like leisure reading. I only listened to podcasts that were informative, science or philosophy, something like that. And in many ways, just to be clear, it really paid off. I learned a lot. And it was also before my brain injury. So I had a much easier time absorbing information just from like hearing it. That is not so much the case for me anymore after the brain injury. But I met Nick. And Nick loves story. So when I met Nick, he said like the one thing that he's always wanted to do, the only thing that he like really cares about is having kids and taking them on adventures and telling them stories. And Jordan Peterson talks about stories a lot too. And I started thinking about stories and narrative and like why they matter so much. Particularly because I think about all the people that I am like, the type A, businessy, sciencey, very focused, feels guilty for not being productive for like 100% of the day. Those are the people that I really, really understand because that's me. That's been my struggle. And it's really interesting because I find that when I was in that space, there was like kind of this human element that was missing from me. And I see this as well in different friends that I have. There's friends of mine that are very much more connected to story and life and other friends that are less so. And it's very interesting because when I meet somebody and they're deeply human in like a really rich and meaningful way, they almost always love stories. I remember one of my favorite things about Melina Stephen's ex-wife, is her love of stories. She's able to kind of find and rip joy out of anything and anywhere all at once. And I remember like looking at her and thinking all the time about like how she had something that I don't have very well. I don't have this like deeply human connected personality that can just like find joy in everything and is grounded. I don't get like lost in story. But it's really interesting because when I look back at my life, one thing that I lost through college and through my arc of kind of becoming fixated on only fact and information, it was also paired alongside with becoming not a fundamentalist anymore and really questioning my religion. I used to be an avid writer. I wrote all the time. I wrote poetry all the time. I won poetry contests. I wrote for productions sometimes, like not paid or anything, but I was a really good kind of young writer. And my goal back then was to write a novel. And I don't write at all anymore. It kind of got killed through university, especially. I used to be very creative and kind of abstract in how I wrote. I think on my Patreon, I shared one time a story I wrote when I was like 19. I think I shared the story called Of Birds and Moons. I wrote it in one sitting. If you want to read it, it's on Patreon. You can go. But it's a really beautiful story. It's actually really, really beautiful. And it's kind of written, I really love writing in like that mythological way. Well, I used to. I think a lot about the lack of stories and how important they are for meaning making. What made me think of this is I got to a point in The Wandering Inn where this character's talking to fairies because, you know, I'm a nerd. And the fairies are very wrapped up in this concept of lore and story. And they've been mean to this character up until this point, until the character starts telling these fairies stories about superheroes, specifically telling them about Superman, which is very funny, right? It's a funny idea for the writer themselves to think, you know what a mythological character would be interested in? Stories about Superman. But I think what I've been missing, and I know that I miss all the time, and I think so many of us in North America specifically miss, maybe Europe too, I'm not sure the culture there as much, but we really miss the importance of meaning making. I think the American business culture specifically, which unfortunately has kind of spread its little zeitgeist tendrils into academia, into everything, because everything is capitalism. This is a legitimate kind of concern and criticism of the socialist, is capitalism is in everything. It's got its sticky little fingers in everything. And that's true. Capitalism is the fundamental driver of the way that we think about goal-oriented behavior in North America. Which I'm sure is a fascinating study right there. If anyone wants to make a study on behavioral activation and affinity for capitalism, I think that would be actually really interesting. And if you do the study, send me the results. Just to do a little correlation, you know? I'm curious. But I think this zeitgeist of success and money-making and growth and expansionism comes at the cost of what so many of our old fables are about, which is, you know, nature and connectedness and magic and striving for things and dreams that are by all means wholly unattainable and striving anyways despite all odds to achieve it. And I think as we age, a lot of that gets like eroded out of us, and for good cause. You know, some a lot of people won't make it. That type of thinking is like the sneako thinking. It's literally being like, yeah, not everyone's going to become like a rich crypto bro, but some might, and everyone theoretically could, so I'm going to sell it, right? And I'm not advocating for that. That's like dreams gone wild. But when I try to think about what it is that appeals to the populist, that appeals to the MAGA voter, that is appealing to people so much, is that we have like lost narrative. I've been so horrified over the Imam Khalif stuff to see just how people are just like fully willing to, they don't even care what reality is. They explicitly don't care. It's horrifying to see people be like, I don't care if Trump is a dictator. I want him as a dictator. It's just like, what the fuck are you talking about? But it speaks to this like crisis of meaning making that I feel like is growing within our culture. And I think stories and religion are the sources of these things. And I mean, it's even interesting. Look at the timing of how decayed our major story makers are. Think about Hollywood. Think about how much they suck. They're never creating new stuff. When they do take incredible stories, they'll take like The Wheel of Time, a classic and a beloved story for a reason, and then they'll just change shit to match their own personal political zeitgeist, because the story matters less than the function. You know, the outcome and the functionality and the productiveness of it matters more than just telling a story. And I feel like my frustration has been growing so much with politics and with kind of just like the world at large. I've just been really frustrated and agitated, and probably with myself. You know, I feel like whenever we get really mad at the world, the first thing we have to do is like look in and be like, what am I avoiding inside? Which is probably for me is that betrayal of not going back to rescue my younger self, who loved to write and would leave the house for hours on end with her dog and sit in nature and write poetry and explore nature and try to find little hidden adventures within the forest. And I mean, I was as a kid just enwrapped in this story of nature and adventure. I mean, no wonder isekais appeal to me so much. It's essentially getting thrown into a forest with nothing but what's on your body and finding adventure, which is what I kind of did as a kid. You know, I would crawl through the forest and find adventure. I'd find abandoned buildings and I'd explore them, and I'd crawl up high in the really sketchy attics that I definitely shouldn't have been in. And I'd dodge through feet deep piles of pigeon shit. And then I think about our society and how empty so many people are. And our society is missing meaning making. I feel like when so many people are like, why are you religious? Why do you believe in God? I believe in God for obviously personal reasons. Like the reality is, I think I said this to Supreme, I keep having experiences that it would be foolish of me not to. But there's also this part of me that's like, maybe no matter what, believing in the story is part of the purpose. Like a story that gives me meaning. And it's like, it doesn't even matter if it's true. I think it is true, essentially. I'm essentially saying, I think magic's real. I just don't really care about the nature of that magic. I'm pretty sure I know what it is, but I could be fucking wrong, and it doesn't matter because it gives me joy. And I feel like when I get mad at the world, I'm externalizing my own stuff, which is not going back and rescuing my child self who wanted to write stories and got crushed by college, especially because I think it's hard to go back and rescue that part of myself, because college was by and large so good for me. It was the first place ever where me as a disagreeable, smart, intellectually curious woman was celebrated. I wasn't just celebrated, I was embraced. It was the first time where every room I went into, people just liked me. And they were okay with it. And they thought my edginess was funny. They just thought it was funny when I was edgy. And kind of like pushed the lines of social taboo a little bit and would be a lot more blunt and direct. And I feel like the world so often calls that out of us. that story making because it's seen as silly and childish, but it's not. It's meaning. And when I look at the people who are enwrapped around populist ideas, people who don't even care what's true anymore, I see it as like this hollowed out crisis of people saying, I don't give a fuck what's true. I just need meaning. I just need the world to make sense, and I need a narrative to place the world within. And the problem is that, in my view, obviously, bad actors have taken advantage of that crisis and exploited it. And I'm frustrated because the Democrats just keep acting like these narratives are silly, and the only thing that they're willing to do is also kind of lie. And I don't know how to do it, but we've got to have story. I need story back in my life. I need to engage with story. I need to not just be a passive consumer of story, but I need to engage in story and creation somehow. I don't know how. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I need to do it. A lot of people do it with kids. You know, maybe I just got a baby in me and I'll be okay. I'm just kidding. There's nothing more awful than to be like, this baby will fix my problems. No pressure, child. But yeah, I feel like we need story and magic back in our world. There's a reason why we love Marvel characters, and there's a reason why we're disgusted when people have the audacity to take our heroes and these fictional creations and bastardize them for their own purpose. There's a just reason and why people hate what Hollywood is doing to Marvel and to Star Wars, even though I don't even like Star Wars, because you're taking stories that gave us magic and you're using it for your own personal gain, and you are not respecting what magic was there beforehand. And it doesn't mean all of it was right, but if you won't respect the magic of the original story, then don't touch it. Don't consecrate this like holy ground, essentially. I don't know what I'm saying. I've been just wrestling with this a lot. My day has been shit, and I feel like I do extremely melodramatic edge posting when I'm having bad days. So you're welcome, or I'm sorry, and hopefully somebody enjoys this. And if you don't, that's okay. It's been a long fucking week, so I need a brain break a little bit. Yeah. If you took the time to listen to any of this, God, every time I go about thanking people, I start crying. Fuck me. But crying's okay. Emotions are fine. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's just been a really bad week. Okay. I am so appreciative if you took any time to watch this. I am not trying to cry to build like parasocial weirdo points. I don't need anything. You are not genuinely, I feel so bad that I am having any level of tears because it feels really manipulative. That's not what I'm doing. So like, don't feel a need to do anything as a result of me tearing up. I just literally, you watching this and you caring enough to listen to my dumb self is incredible. And I hope I am intimidated by the honor that is. Truly, I am terrified of content creation because I am so awed by the fact that people would ever bother to care about what I have to say, because I'm not like, I get people watching Mr. Beast. I don't personally watch it, but like I get it. It's just like flashy and exciting and like, whoa, things are going on. But that's not the content that I'm offering. And I'm aware of that. I am aware that I'm giving you C-tier content. Just thank you. I really appreciate you watching, and I hope you have joy. And if you don't have joy in your life, I hope you genuinely give yourself enough love and space to explore what that looks like, and try to find magic in your life somewhere. Big hugs, big kisses. Think well, and have a day as wonderful as you are.